Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the 8-Bit Adventures podcast. I am your host, Sean Hayes, and with me is my wonderful co-host, as always, Courtney Bolin.
Hey, everybody.
So, we got a couple items, mostly some tabletop news this week, although we do have some pop culture news. And a lot of it's going to revolve around the Ravenloft book that's coming out. It seems to be a lot of information is being sort of slowly leaked through a drip feed by wizards. So not really leaked, but just like released.
I was going to say, it wasn't leaked. It was just, it was a teaser.
Yeah.
It was a teaser.
But there's been a lot of stuff from the book that's being like talked about over the past like week and a half, basically.
Yeah.
So we've got that. We've got basically Marvel Phase 4 and some other sort of sundry news. But the bulk of this is going to be talking about that Ravenloft book, just because there's some meat to discuss there. So, why don't we get right into it?
Yes.
All right. Okay, so to start things off, yes, Vanrickton's Guide to Ravenloft. I believe it was one of the writers that worked on the book, released the table of contents in the book, which gives us a lot more information than you might think, in that it tells us exactly like almost everything that's going to be in the book.
Yeah.
So, including what domains of dread, character options, what monsters are going to appear, as well as like what are the titles of the other sections, which will inform what exactly is going into those sections.
Yep. Yeah, there's a lot. Like I never really looked at the table of contents of something before and been like, oh yeah, okay, I can see all of the. No, this is a lot. And we will definitely be getting into that more in our deep dive.
Yeah.
So next up, we have the start of Phase 4 of Marvel releases with we got a new trailer for all of that Phase 4 lineup, including Black Widow, Shang and the Legend of the Ten Rings, Eternals, Spider-Man, No Way Home, Doctor Strange in the Multiverse. Spider-Man No Way Home. There we go. Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, Thor Love and Thunder, Black Panther Wakanda Forever. Words, I have them tonight. Swear. The Marvels, Ant-Man and the Wasp, I can't even.
Quantumania.
Thank you.
It's Quantumania put smashed together.
Yes, and Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3.
Up next, so Sony has decided to become a minority investor, minority shareholder, I think, and partner with Discord. So they're going to be working on directly integrating Discord in with the PlayStation Network, as Discord is sort of the leading voice chat solution for console gaming. Which is why I often point out why it's silly for people to constantly harp on Nintendo for not having a voice chat solution. When Discord is free and everybody's using it. Like,
yeah, there's this already this thing that's out there that pretty much we're all using. So I think that'll be interesting. And a new trailer has been released for the newest season of the Adventure Zone, Ethersea. I don't think
I think either Ethersea or Ethersea.
Yeah. So that will be interesting.
So yeah, that is so the Adventure Zone is the podcast by the McElroys.
Yeah, I was gonna say I knew that you knew a little bit more about. I'm like,
Yeah,
I know the Adventure Zone, but I don't know. I don't listen to it, unfortunately.
yeah. Um, so yeah, and that's kind of gonna wrap up our news for this week. There wasn't a whole lot of big gaming announcements. Um,
No, I mean Pokemon Snap came out last week, last Friday.
yeah. And I mean, there's stuff going like weird stuff going on with the Apple and Epic case, but it's not really. It's more weird than it is like big news. Um, so yeah,
I don't know. I just keep getting bombarded with those AT&T commercials of the iPhone that now comes in purple. Like Candyman, the Candyman song from
it's
Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory
whatever.
is just going on in my head all the time. We have the TV on at work. I swear that ad plays like every 15 minutes. Every single ad break it plays.
Hmm.
It's gonna make me hate the movie soon.
I mean, yeah. Um, but yeah, so that is going to wrap up our quickfire news for this week. So we'll get into our deep dive and talk about Vanrickton's Guide to Ravenloft.
Yeah.
All right. So, let's see. I have to pull this up. Um, as basically it was shared out in a screenshot. So, um, what we have are chapter one is your character creation and character options. So it will include the lineages that we got an an unearthed arcana for the gothic characters. These include the Dampier, the Hexblood, and the Reborn, where you
Yep.
can either be an undead or a construct. Um, it includes dark gifts, which are sort of like boons.
I was
They're
gonna say,
and like
yeah. Are those like are
fey
those
boons
like
and things like that.
warlock boons types of
No,
deals?
no, they're
Okay.
not. They operate like supernatural boons from the Dungeon Master's Guide,
Oh,
which
okay.
operate outside of the character advancement table and they're treated
Mhm.
almost like a category of magic item in and of themselves. Now, the difference is dark bargains often have a corruption element to them, so that the more you give into it, the worse it gets. Um, so, like, they could have used that as a mechanic for the Warlock class as a baseline mechanic. However, Wizards wanted to have the possibility of having a warlock that like is essentially like stealing the power from their patron, like they're using their patron's power to like overthrow their patron, sort of a thing. So like you're using fiendish power to like fight fiends. um
Yeah.
they wanted to have that be a possibility within that class. And so having like a corruption mechanic and saying like
Yeah.
everybody is corrupt, you know that wouldn't really fit. Um,
Yeah.
so, uh, the Bardic College of Spirits and the Undead Patron for Warlocks. Speaking of Warlocks, are going to be the subclasses in there. So we have seen Unearthed Arcanas for these. Um, the Undead Warlock is a little bit similar to the Undying Patron that I think was in Tasha's guide. Um, but it's basically like you become more and more like Lich-like as you progress in level.
Okay.
Um, and then College of
I
Spirits
might.
is all about like calling on. Um, it's using performance in such a way to call upon history and the spirits of the dead to. It's almost it's very similar to in theme like the ancestral guardian like barbarian, um,
Okay.
where you're calling on like ancestor spirits and spirits of the dead. Um,
Okay. All
yeah.
right. Because I hear that and like I read that and I think, okay, they're about to get spoopy.
These are intended to be spooky backgrounds. Yes.
Yeah.
Uh,
No,
gothic themed.
spoopy, as in like funny, scary.
I mean, you can. That's not necessarily the intent of Ravenloft.
As I say, the whole intent of Ravenloft is half the reason why Courtney doesn't like Halloween.
And that basically rounds out chapter 1. Chapter 2 is creating a Dark Lord, creating a domain, so a domain of dread, as well as genres of horror and how to apply them to your D&D game. So it breaks it down to body horror, cosmic horror, dark fantasy, folk horror, ghost stories, and gothic horror, and other assorted horror genres. So Wizards did a series of like Facebook posts and other social media posts that describe like a one sentence overview of what that horror means. So like gothic horror is about using a monster to show sort of humanity's moral failures, which was the entire point. Like that's why Frankenstein and Dracula and sort of like stories about werewolves from like the Victorian era, like that was and ghost stories from the Victorian era was like about that. Was to show like these monsters were supposed to be a reflection of the failings of like Victorian values. So it's basically it's a reflection of how we are monsters, and then externalized as a creature.
Are we the
baddies? So ghost stories are basically like tales about vengeance and retribution, because it's typically the ghost is someone that was wronged, and thus their tragic death prevents them from moving on until they exact vengeance on. It's typically not the person that committed the wrong, because it's often decades later, but someone that resembles the person or related to the person, and the only way to overcome that is to right the wrong. So it's a very, again, morality sort of thing. And I would say ghost stories are kind of related to gothic horror. Folk horror draws upon the themes of like isolation, superstition. They say paranoia, but it's not the. I don't want to say it's the clinical term for it.
Is it the things that go bump in the night?
It's the fear of the things that go bump in the night, and the fear
like
of
you don't know what the bump. You don't know what's behind the bump. You just heard the bump.
That it is it's a fear of an environment where there is danger, ever present. So, a lot of like cabin in the woods type stuff would qualify as folk horror.
I'm thinking of A Quiet Place.
Sort of.
Because you don't see the monsters very much at all. Like you see like glimpses of them.
Yeah, I mean it's more of, I mean, because there's like an external creature and everything, folk horror is kind of more like stuff like The Village, or The Wicker Man, or where it's most often humans, and like, it's often a belief system is the problem at large.
So it's not it's not in the movie Children of the Corn, but it's what the townspeople who lived in like the physical location of Children of the Corn, like the people who lived in that town were going out and messing with and like scaring the bejesus out of all of the people that were like filming it and stuff. And like that's how I see that. It's like it's human elements that are somehow messing with other humans.
Yeah. I mean, to a certain
really
extent.
bad at grasping horror stuff. I've never really been
It's
drawn to
also
it.
there is an element of making you question your belief systems as well.
Okay.
So, let's see. Dark fantasy is, it's taking classic fantasy and applying either some elements of these other tropes. Often has tragedy as its focal point. Um,
Mhm.
so I mean, like the Black Cauldron is dark fantasy.
Oh,
Um,
absolutely, all day long. Yeah,
uh,
Gurgi is the bestest boy.
so and it's like it has it's the fantasy genre, but it's
But it's very dark, it's very big, bad, evil guy,
yeah,
um,
it's not
with
necessarily about heroes who it's not necessarily about the heroes who are trying to rise above and fight against the stuff and everything, but more of uh, the overall setting and the themes involved in that.
mhm. It's not we're gonna be heroes and get, we're not gonna be heroes and kill the Horned King. We're
And
gonna
I mean, like,
just stop him
it's
somehow.
you that's not to say that like the heroes end up winning in the end or not. Um
Yeah.
but it's often uh I don't know.
Yeah.
Here's the other thing is a lot of these genres have like crossover with other genres, and
Oh, yeah.
a specific work is often multi-genre within these sort of subgenres of horror. Um,
Mhm.
so I'm trying to do my best
No, and
with
I'm
this.
appreciating it. As I said, Sean, like, I am the person who likes a silly Halloween as opposed to a scary Halloween.
Yeah.
So
Now, supposedly, uh, they are going to talk about like like a scale for horror, so
mhm.
that like if your players like Ravenloft as a concept but aren't big fans of horror and aren't big fans of like constantly being scared in a role-playing setting, it talks about how to do that sliding scale so that if you want to do like a more Scooby-Doo like type of Ravenloft game, you can do that.
Yes. Yes,
Um
that was gonna be my question of which genre of horror does Scooby-Doo fall under?
so here's the thing, Scooby-Doo's not horror. It's
Fair.
ultimately mystery with sort of just a supernatural veneer on it. But ultimately, at the end, it's all revealed to be smoke and mirrors and a guy in a rubber mask, right?
Yep, and he
And
would
it's
have gotten
also
away
like
with it
nobody's ever
too.
afraid of dying in Scooby Doo. Um,
Yeah.
if you're going to do it that way, like it could be argued that it's a very elaborate like murder mystery. Like if you are going to incorporate like murder and stuff like that, um,
Mhm.
because like that's the thing is like you know, like you can have scary elements and not have it be horror. Like you could have
Yeah.
it be a thriller or a mystery without having it delve into these concepts. Um
Yeah.
so but it's a way of doing it, and um they do talk about the tension, like at some point you have to release that tension. So humor uh can also factor in as well, because like if it's just like it's not healthy to keep people's anxiety just ratcheted up for a 2 to 5 hour session.
That's why
You
they have
have to
clowns in
break.
Cirque
You have
du
to have a break
Soleil.
at some point. Um,
Yeah.
and
Yep.
it's also, I mean, if that's what you, and like even if it's not just necessarily humor, but just allowing people to catch their breath. Um, whereas if it's just constant anxiety ridden, uh,
Mhm.
from fear for like a 5 hour D&D session, uh
That
it,
does
it might
something
not
to
be
your
very good
body.
for the players and the DM.
Mhm.
So,
Like, not only is your character, but as I said, like, that's why, like, Cirque du Soleil is a great kind of example of your body and your brain is just, like, so much it can only take so much certain stimulation of certain things, and, like, that's why there's clowns in Cirque du Soleil because and that's why there's clowns in general. They can stay where they're appropriately supposed to stay, um, and not start walking on the streets, but, um like, they're there to release that tension, to release that excitement, like, because even if you're watching this really cool aerial thing or at a rodeo or, something else, like, We need releases of pressure. Whether that pressure is from good excitement or it's from anxiety and all of these reactions from the horror genre, it's necessary. You need to give them a break.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the last two, so
We've talked
cosmic
about mental
horror.
health a lot, so
Yeah.
like,
I want to get through
yeah.
the genres before we move on.
Mhm.
Cosmic horror is the fear of insignificance of self. Um, it is not squirmy tentacle monsters. You can have cosmic horror and not have squirmy tentacle monsters. Squirmy tentacle monsters are kind of a mix and subgenre of this and body horror. Um, and they are a symptom of cosmic horror. They are not the part of the core theme. So it is often the case of
They are not mutually exclusive.
cosmic horror to feature these uh like older than time beings. And they might be, regular gods. They might be elder gods, they might be elder beings, they might be titanic elemental beings or something that because they are so ancient and they're so prolific and so enormous on a cosmic scale, is that essentially like their day-to-day plans, if they have them, uh are on a scale that mortal minds aren't really meant to comprehend. I mean,
Mhm.
another thing could be the discovery of multidimensional beings, right? Beings that inhabit multiple dimensions of existence simultaneously, right? So that like any action they do is now affecting like different versions of different worlds all at once.
Oh, that just makes me feel queasy.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the point. Is like, but ultimately, it's the fear of it's almost a little bit nihilist too, right? There's a fear of that nothing you do ultimately matters because the world will still keep turning. The universe is, enormously vast, and that you are just uh, uh, or that rather to not use a singular uh, singular directive voice. That we are all just specks of dust floating in the wind, and there's nothing we can do about it. And there are beings
Satan
out
thinks
there that uh, that we are so inconsequential to that they don't even notice any of what we're doing, because our planet is our planet is a speck of dust in the wind to them. Um, so that's kind of where like the elder god thing ties in, and the whole tentacle thing is just because that was a feature of Lovecraft's work, which is regarded as kind of the starting point for this genre. Um, I just There's been some discussion on the Facebook post for
there's
this,
been some
and the
discourse
examples that
about
were
that.
given of examples after Lovecraft and examples that should be used instead of Lovecraft, uh, not really cosmic horror. Um, so, so I'm just a little irritated about that. Body horror is the last one. So body horror's tough to get right, and I say this because a lot of body horror relies on sort of ableist tropes, um, and it's the fear of sort of how one's own body operates or does not operate, and so
Okay.
um, so a lot of it is often of portraying um, bodies that don't fit uh, a physiologically typical mold.
So would it be fair to say that shows and things that really happened, like, back in the day when they had circuses with, like, and I use this phrase, gently, with freak shows, with individuals that were oddities among the general
Yeah, there
population.
is an element of that, and I mean that's kind of what it was playing into was
Okay.
fears of basically people that look different, often wildly different, um, for entertainment. Um,
Yeah. So
so
I'm thinking of,
and
like,
this is
American
a
Horror Story Freak Show, like, that
yeah,
season
yeah,
with everybody seemingly, every yeah,
yeah. It's this
okay.
is a genre that has a difficult time because it has traditionally relied on tropes that are harmful to um, disabled folks, whether it's physical or in some cases mental or emotional. Um,
Mhm.
uh, so my hope is that they include examples of how to get it right. And some examples that I've seen are like uh, being given superpowers and not being able to handle them is an example of like how you could do body horror well.
Yeah.
Or just an example that isn't necessarily ableist, but totally body horror is The Fly. Things where you are metamorphosizing into something completely different and like your body is physically changing into that. Um, it could be
Yeah.
another example. Um, the trick is to not use a an appearance. How do I describe this? So the part where it gets wrong is it's using it as a moral failing, as an example of a
There we
moral
go.
failing,
Yeah.
right? Where it's corruption and that uh, people that bear corruption, um,
Are worse,
also have some sort of
are seen as
moral,
yeah, or seen as
yeah,
lesser than because of
yeah,
whatever form that
um,
corruption is going to be taken.
yeah. There is an argument that 300 is guilty of this, uh, since basically one of the characters who like is treated poorly, but then ultimately like betrays everybody and sort of leans into the sort of like, well, you're an outcast and you're corrupted and you're evil, like leans into being evil
Oh,
for
the whole if they
having
say yeah, the whole if they
um
say I'm the bad guy, then I'm gonna be the bad guy
kind
kind of thing.
of and sort of getting vengeance, but
Yeah.
because the individual had was physically disabled. um so yeah, I mean, in the description, they also said like being hyper aware of bodily functions, to a degree of like all of the like normally autonomous functions of your body that like you don't pay attention to. Like having sudden awareness of that can create this sense of dread and just like being too aware of what's going on, right? Like imagine if you could feel the stretch and pull of like every single one of your skin cells. Like, and not just, if it's like undergoing some sort of
Yeah, but you
uh
could just feel it all the time
like just the
anyway.
normal stretching and shrinking of your skin cells as like you move your hands. Like if you feel every
Yeah.
single one of them. Um, and I
I
think
mean,
I think that could
a more subtle way to think about that is like the whole you don't think about your breathing or your blinking until you think about your breathing or your blinking.
yeah.
But and that's like on a much smaller scale. But it's funny because when you said that, I was like, wait, increased but so wait, you can smell a fart from 3 rooms over?
No, that would be an example of like the superpowers you don't want
So that would
or
just be a super
superpowers were forced upon you. This would be like you having awareness and feeling like every moment of digestion occurring, which normally we
ooh.
don't, right? Normally it's just an
Mhm,
autonomous thing, it just happens kind of a thing. But like if you feel every particle of matter moving like down your throat into your
mhm.
stomach, past your stomach into your large intestine, small intestine, or
Yeah.
small intestine, large intestine, and sort of
No,
like the
large and then
nutrients being
small.
extracted. It's being too aware, right?
Yeah.
And it's kind of when you think about it that way, the opposite of cosmic horror, right? Or rather, the same thing of gaining too much knowledge, but moving in the opposite direction. So
Yeah.
cosmic horror is often you learn about how the universe really works, and you learn about stuff that like you're not meant to know because it's too big, it's too vast.
Mm-hmm.
But it's too vast in the sense that like there's so much out there. Whereas with this idea, excuse me, for body horror, it's you're not meant to know the minutia of what's going on under your own skin.
Yeah.
And so becoming aware of that, and again, too much, but like in a very localized space.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's another way and an interesting way to think about it. It's also, I mean, essentially, yeah, having very, very again metamorphosizing into stuff that is totally different, right? So that
Mm-hmm.
it's like becoming something else.
Like you
But
become a giraffe.
yeah, um, but
Oh, to
at
become
this,
a wolf.
but it's important to basically and this applies to any of the horror things. It's very easy for any of the horror genres to slip into equating uh sort of evil with just
Abnormal.
stuff that happens to people,
Yeah.
whether it's um I don't know. But
Yeah, it's
it's you got to take care to
it's
when crafting an adventure. um this is also for this genre particularly, you'll want to do sort of a session 0 and just a player safety sheet, um and get a
yeah.
sense from your players okay, so you're afraid of spiders, like what is the line, like are you okay with like if we do an adventure where it revolves around spiders, so that there is an element of fear, but that we don't cross a line, right?
What are your limits? Do we need
Um,
a safe word?
yeah, well, and also, I mean,
Like,
so that we know going into this, like,
mhm.
is it okay to, go into or sort of approach the limit, or is it something where the limit is I don't want to cover this topic at all?
Yeah, it's like I'd
So,
be okay if you dropped Pennywise in to a horror, but don't make me have to work with Pennywise. Like,
well, I think it's something like well, to take the example of
well,
if
I
it's
mean, I'm just using
clowns.
like, that's one of my fears is
So
Pennywise.
I
I'm
mean,
from Maine. We learn at a
if
young
it's
age.
clowns, like if it's using, uh, I mean, there's a big difference, right? Because it can still be scary for people that have a fear of clowns.
Mhm.
There's a big difference between, while you're out wandering at night, and you see uh, Puddle's pity party just sort of standing there alone under a streetlight, just watching you, like everywhere you go, and he's not doing anything. Sort of the whatever it was, the episode of SpongeBob where they're the cops, and it's just like he's just standing there menacingly, uh,
Yeah.
versus basically anything that Pennywise does, which is to get up into your face and with the
Or
ultimate
what was
goal
it
of
what was it,
causing
like,
physical harm.
3 or 4 years ago where the people were dressing up as clowns in their neighborhoods and going around and harassing people and scaring the cripes out of people with, like, not
I
actually
do remember
attacking
that.
them,
My
but, like,
favorite part of that
making
was as a
yeah.
response to that, there was someone dressed up as Batman who was going around beating up the people that were like dressing up as clowns to like intentionally harass people.
I'm like, yeah, because they were going around with, like, machetes, if I remember correctly, and, like, haunted
In some
house
cases, yes.
style, like
There were, a lot of cases they were just going around to like prank people and scare them, but
but there were some that were
there were some that took it too far. And in those cases, yeah, there was a guy dressed up as Batman who was going around just like
good,
beating them up.
good,
Yeah.
good. Yeah, I
almost as good as Angle Grinder Man. But anyway, um, so yeah, so it talks about each of those. I would assume. Let's see, how long are the pages? 2 pages. So a 2-page write up. So I would assume it would give
Yeah.
examples, what to do, what not to do, overall themes of that genre. And then it talks about other ones, and it looks like there's about probably 2 to 3 pages devoted to that.
Yeah.
My guess it'll probably talk about like thrillers, um, probably like slasher type stuff, because
Yeah.
that is definitely a genre.
Mhm.
Um,
I mean, that's where you really go in and you let your inner, because you know that everything you go up against is you're just gonna have to kill it. You're just gonna have to kill it.
um, and yeah, I don't know. Um,
I,
yeah,
again, I'm not really familiar with much horror because that is not my
I mean that definitely covers the main subgenres of it. Um,
yeah. Yeah, because 'cause I'm just like, "No, no, thank you." Just like hearing about in chapter 3, they go on to talk about the different domains of Ravenloft, and I'm like, seeing one here that is the carnival, and I'm like, "No, thank you.
yeah,
No, thank you."
yeah, yeah. That will probably feature spooky clowns.
Yeah, no, thank you. I mean,
Um,
unless we're trying to do some sort of, like, immersion therapy type of deal, uh, which I see no need to do. I'm perfectly content with being afraid of clowns. It is not interfering with my life because clowns are scary,
yeah.
and should be feared.
Um,
Um,
well, so why don't we talk about those? There's a lot. I think they said there's
there's a
30 in the
lot.
book. Um, so
There's 120 pages just
so
about.
obviously they got Barovia. You got if you do Ravenloft, you have to have Barovia. Barovia is sort of the mainstay of them. They have Bluet
Mhm.
Spur. So Bluet Spur is an interesting one. It is mind flares is basically
Oh,
that's why it says
cool.
the God Brain under that. Borka, the Carnival, Darkon, Dementlu, Falkovnia, Harakir, which they did a write up on, I think on D&D Beyond, of um, how, and like with an interview with one of the writers, and it was basically it was like how to do sort of like the Mummy style horror without having it be like
Tropey.
colonialist. Because you think about those stories are written from like a British point of view, and like essentially Brits going into Egypt, uh, tomb raiding, uh, even under
At
the
least
pretense of
at
legitimate
least they don't have
archaeological
the part,
digs.
like, at least those movies don't have the parts where the Brits legitimately ate mummies. 'Cause that was a thing in history.
Okay,
Um, they also we also don't have a lot of different mummies because they turned them into paint. Mummy Brown.
yeah.
Um,
Well,
like
I guess what I mean, like it's the movie The Mummy,
yeah.
where the original one, where it was
Mhm.
Bela Lugosi, I think, who not Egyptian. So I was talking about this, like having it uh try to actually fit, and what it's like to like it that it's a little more horrifying to uh be a resident of this domain and have this happen, as opposed to where we often also see with mummy, and even Brendan Fraser's The Mummy movie, which is regarded as widely beloved, um is basically a bunch of like British people coming in and saving the day. uh
Yeah.
you know Granted, they're also the ones that are causing the problem, but
As I say, they're going in to pick up their own mess, but it's still like yeah.
yeah,
When Night at the Museum can get an actual Egyptian actor to play an Egyptian character, like, it's not that hard. These
it's really
these
not.
individuals exist. There is a whole country filled with them.
um so we also have Haslan. Ikath, Kalikari,
Kalikari?
Cardicus, Lamordia, Mordant, uh, Rishmalu,
Reichenmold.
Rishmalu, uh,
Mm.
Tempest, Valakan, and then they have under other domains of dread, Sire 1313, the Morning Rail. So that is from Eberron, which
Is
is
that?
neat. It's really neat because this is the first time that they've actually integrated Eberron with Ravenloft. And it makes sense because Ravenloft is supposed to be a sort of weird plane that connects to other material planes. There's not a whole lot of places that do that. Because Ravenloft is essentially meant to be a giant prison. It is meant to be a prison for these Dark Lords. And that when
Oh,
you become a Dark Lord, you are given your own domain of dread that is custom tailored to you. It is meant to be your prison. And it is a reflection of you and the crimes that you committed.
oh, that's
But the fact that it's also not a prison that's set up by good people, it's a prison set up by, like, elder evils. So,
yeah.
Forlorn, Gastria, Gehenna, which that's interesting, because that has previously been done as, like, a layer of hell. I think one of the layers of the 9 hells.
Oh, okay.
Invidia, Keening, Clor, Markovia, the Nightmare Lands, Neranjan, Novavasa, Oder, the Rider's Bridge, Recibolos, Scaena, Sea of Sorrows, the Shadowlands, which I'm like,
I'm
I
so
don't have
happy
the Metal
that
Gear Solid noise for that, but that's basically, so the Shadowlands is like the realm of the dead in Warcraft.
okay.
So we'll see what the
See, I'm just
Shadowlands
glad that you know
entails.
how to pronounce all these things because I can't
I'm just
words
making it up. I
tonight.
don't know. I'm just making it up as I go, based
You're
on
better at
English
wordsing than
phonetics.
I am tonight, so
Uh, Staunton Bluffs, uh, Sorang, Tovog, the Vog Agency, and Juricia. Now, of that, they do not have Lord Soth's domain. So, I don't know if we're going to get Lord Soth in this book, which is a travesty. However, this book was likely being produced before they like made nice with Weiss and Hickman over Dragonlance, so that's probably why Lord Soth is not in this book.
Mhm.
So I don't know. Or unless they renamed his domain, but I mean, so that was a little sad to see. So his story is basically he was pledged. Um, Basically, he was in the service of the dragon armies in Krynn, which were the bad guys. And
Yep.
very cartoonish, like we're going to take over the world bad guys in the service of Takhisis or Tiamat. Uh,
Okay.
so it was like army like Ganon, army of bad guys, blah, blah, mustache
Mhm.
twirling. And basically Lord Soth, like through betrayal and everything, you know, kind of advanced his machinations and
Ooh.
everything. And during some battle, it was he, like I think it was he died, and so did
Mhm.
like his wife and child. And it was through that act, like reanimated as a Death Knight or something, and then swore
Ooh.
vengeance upon uh basically the heroes of the Lance.
Mhm.
And in particular focused on Lorana, who was I think one of the elf queens, or she was an elven princess or something, and so like started obsessing about her specifically. And his big thing was like obsessing over um, basically female characters that were like main characters in Dragonlance, but in a like it was sort of like Strahd in like a you remind me of my wife, but also like I'm gonna murder you because you caused her death, sort of a thing.
Oh, that's lovely.
Or like I'm gonna murder you and then reanimate you, and you will be my right hand lording over the undeath in this region.
Yeah, that's not terrifying.
And it was basically perpetually failing and failing and failing at that goal. Um, and then the Dark Powers of Ravenloft were like, yoink. And he just ended up in Ravenloft. And now he's stuck there. Which and apparently has had encounters with Strahd. And like is working against Strahd, basically. And that's another element, is like often if Dark Lords ever come into contact with one another, they're often opposed. So that like they're not like the evil League of Evil. It's they are very individual and antagonistic to each other.
Okay.
So then we get some basically NPCs, horror adventures. So how to run games, preparing for the games.
Something that I really like seeing is after the horror.
Yeah.
Like, I'm really, really hoping that that is a self-care, a check-in, a make sure that everybody is okay. Um, because horror can be similar to how any game can get really intense. Um, I think that it is very important, especially if you are possibly putting literal nightmare fuel into people's brains, that you discuss that. And you what's the word? Debrief. There we go.
You decompress.
No, debrief is the actual clinical term I was looking
Oh,
for.
is it? Okay. Okay.
Yeah, but
So yeah. Also, it has the horror toolkit, which include curses, fear, and stress. So I wonder if there's going to be specific mechanics for doing fear and stress,
Mhm.
which I think that would add an interesting element to a game. Is if you had mechanical functions for that. I do also like using those terms of fear and stress as opposed to sanity, because I think that often gets thrown about as a core mechanic in RPGs, um, without really acknowledging how mental illness really works. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
I
Haunted
like
Traps, Survivors, The House of Lament, which must be an intro adventure. Sorry, I didn't want to get bogged down in rehashing that
yeah.
topic again, because we kind of covered that under just the genres of horror. Of
Mhm.
Horror has a bad history of essentially using folks using representations of uh, folks that are often discriminated against for entertainment value. So yeah. Uh, Sorry, I again, it's really hard for me to not hammer that over and over and over again.
Well, and I think that that makes it easier for I'm just gonna use the blanket term of neurotypical players, um, who maybe don't experience mental illness or, um, don't at a rate where it interferes with their life. Um, I think that fear and stress is a much more relatable term, um, and is something that more
Yeah,
people can relate to as opposed to just saying, "Oh, you're going crazy." It's like, well, no, there's fear and stress. Like, it's much better, much better. Oh, this okay. So next in chapter 5, we have the monsters of Ravenloft,
monsters.
and
So this is great.
the
This is where
body
we get
the
the
body taker plant.
yeah. So it's revenge, or not revenge. Whatever of the body snatchers, Night of the Body
Yeah,
Snatchers. I don't know. Case of the Body Snatcher. It's body snatchers. It's
yeah,
pod people invasion. Thank you, errant engineer. Invasion of
yeah.
the body. Yeah, it's basically there's plants that show up they people get abducted, they get thrown into the plant pods, and they get replaced by plant-grown clones of that person.
Yep. Okay. Yeah. This is all.
Brain in a jar, we've seen that before. Carrion Stalker, so there may be some because I think that's just a regular monster manual monster, but no, I'm thinking of Carrion Crawler, sorry. So Carrion Stalker would be a new thing. Carrionet.
Carrionet?
Carrionet, this sounds great. So this
No.
is some kind of
No. Like,
this is just
I
some
love
kind
y'all,
of
but
zombie puppet.
no. Like,
uh
I will handle
what's the
body.
over under that it's the size of an actual marionette and it's just like a tiny zombie doll that like it gets pulled around on puppet strings.
No,
Yeah.
no, no,
Now,
no.
Death's Head. Not sure what that is either. Now, Dullahan. Now I know this one. Because it is a Celtic mythology figure. That I have included in Tales of Jamora. So Dullahan is sort of like Headless Horseman, but is a knight. And so often, let's look it up. A lot of Celtic mythology, sort of, fae and spirits are,
Yeah,
often referred to as the Headless Horseman.
yeah.
So basically, yeah. So this is just from a general monster wiki, so take that with a grain of salt. But basically, wields a whip made from a human spine, carries its head under its arm. The head appears dead and rotten, with a demonic grin spread across its face from ear to ear. Sometimes pulls a wagon which is adorned with funeral objects. When the Dullahan stops riding, that is where a person is due to die. When a person calls, or when the Dullahan calls out a person's name, the person immediately perishes. There is no way to bar the road against such a being. All locks and gates open to them when they approach.
Yeah, that's uh-huh. Yep.
So, they're kind of like banshees in that they signify death, um,
Yeah.
and sort of when a person is going to die. Um, so yeah.
Yeah, none of these really sound like anything that I would ever to like, I would gladly take body people or body taker plants over, like, a carrionet. Like, no, no,
Uh,
swarms, no thank you.
Gallows
Um,
Speaker, Gramishka. So I think we're gonna get a bunch of like Eastern European sort of so a lot of like Witcher stuff in here because we also get Strigoi, which are also Eastern European.
mhm,
Um, we're gonna get Jiangxi. I'm always a fan of Jiangxi, which are hopping vampires. Um,
no, no,
uh,
no,
I don't know how to pronounce this, but Loop Garau,
mhm,
Nekrikor, Nosferatu, which don't know if Nosferatu is going to be a category of vampires or a singular vampire. Either way, I'm excited. Um,
it gets a full page?
I mean, most of them get a full
I
page.
mean, most of these do,
That's
though,
just
yeah.
how monster entries work in fifth edition. Um, Priest of Osibus, or Priests of
Mhm,
Osibus. So that might be related to Harakir and sort of that mummy plot line.
mhm.
Uh, Relentless Killer. So Relentless Slash and Relentless Juggernaut. Uh, this is where you get so Relentless Killer. This is Mike Myers slash Jason slash Leatherface slash
Any
basically
other slashers you can think of.
any other thing that
Slap.
might be like partially undead, partially a guy, and they just won't die, and they're here to get you. I don't see any sort of thing about like somebody that inhabits dreams. So I don't know if we're gonna get some sort of Freddy Krueger type monster.
Nope. Nope. I am peacing out
Which, if you
if
really
that
think
is.
about it, that's just like Freddy Krueger's just kind of he's just a guy with a bunch of like claws on his hands that can like just cast dream at will.
But the dream thing, the dreams thing. No,
Yeah.
no,
Starspawn
no.
emissaries, Strigoi, maggot and scarab swarms. I mean, it's a maggot swarm. It's not that terrible. Uh,
Have you ever experienced something with a large amount?
yeah, my trash can about twice a week during the summer.
Talking about even bigger amounts than just that.
Yeah, I know.
It's
Uh, so moving on,
yeah.
Olmist
Yep.
Inquisitors. So, this will be interesting. I think because there are certain realms in Ravenloft where, like, because of the fact that like everything's horrible, is you get Inquisitors that like do the horrible Inquisition type stuff, like witch hunters and everything. Uh, so this could be for one of those domains where like for example, like if you're an elf or if you have red hair, you might have to disguise yourself. Um, we also get unspeakable horrors.
And they can stay unspoken.
That gets 2 pages, so
That can stay
that's
unspoken.
great. Vampiric mind flayers, weir ravens, and zombies. Zombie clot, zombie plague spreader, and swarm of zombie limbs.
I can handle zombie limbs. I can
Uh,
handle zombie limbs.
I think that's great. It's just a swarm of arms and legs.
Yeah.
I think that's going to be fantastic. And then the appendix is a spirit board. So to do uh, because I did not know this. It's the term Ouija board or Ouija board. That's a trademark from that company.
Yep,
So
it is.
that's where you see in like Phasmophobia, they call it like the spirit board.
As I say, there's
Um,
spirit boards or talking boards
yeah,
or like there
yeah, they
are
have to come up with
lots
some
of
of.
other names for
Apparently,
them.
that's also why you don't see them in horror films very often these days. Is that people don't want to pay the licensing rights to have the board in there. Uh,
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I think here's an interesting thing: using the elements in here and essentially like using some of the ghost stuff. You could do a D&D Phasmophobia type game where you play as a bunch of ghost hunters and like you have it set. I mean, wouldn't be that difficult to set it in modern day, or even just do a fantasy style, you know, Phasmophobia type game where it's like, yeah, we just pick locate. We hear about ghost hauntings in different locations, and we're just going to collect evidence, see if there's a ghost actually there. Uh, yeah, we're not
Ghost
allowed to carry
Hunters
weapons, so like we
International.
don't bring any weapons with us. But we've got some ghost huntings. Also, like, I mean, it's a ghost. Like, there's not really much we can do as far as weapons go. Uh,
Ghost Hunters International is what I'm seeing this turning into.
I mean, that's basically what Phasmophobia is.
Yep.
Uh, and the goal is to not die.
The goal is to
um,
always not die.
yeah, but I'm
Yeah,
thinking like
no,
the
this
fear and stress.
is
If fear and stress are a mechanic, that as a mechanic, ghosts, and then doing sorts of different stuff in here, spirit board, um, and other different mechanics for like detecting ghosts and paranormal activity. So yeah, no, I
I'm
think, uh, yeah, all in all, I mean, we'll ultimately have to see. I think one of the big problems that you get with Ravenloft, if you want to do a full comprehensive guide, is
mhm.
often people are like when they hear Ravenloft campaign setting, they're like, "Great, Barovia," and it's like, no, like that's a Barovia campaign setting, because you could do, and I mean they kind of did as an adventure path, for Curse of Strahd. Ravenloft has so many different places in it, that you run into the issue of we can do like a 1 to 2 2-page write up for everything, and that's like half the book. Um,
Yeah.
and I think that might also be why it's compared to other campaign settings, it's a little light on character options. Um, and like I'm not seeing a big thing for like magic items or things like
No.
that. So like we're not seeing any feats. Um,
Mhm.
I don't think we're seeing any new spells either. Um,
Possibly within the horror toolkit with the curses?
no,
Possibly?
I think that I don't think it's gonna. I don't think there's gonna be specific spells under that. I think it's gonna be how to do curses.
Oh,
Uh,
okay.
that aren't just the bestow curse spell because that's
Yeah.
already a spell.
Yeah. I got no clue. I
Because
don't
that's
I
often that's
this
also a thing of in Ravenloft, like most folks can invoke a curse. Uh,
yeah.
it's often considered a bad thing to do to somebody. Uh,
Yeah, I mean, and I'm
and
sure because I know that we got a lot of spells in Tasha's.
yeah, but I mean
Um,
it's meant to be a player guide splat book. So,
yeah.
but I mean Eberron had a bunch. I think Theros had a bunch. And if not spells, then at least magic items. So,
Mhm.
um, but yeah, so we'll see. I think it'll be interesting to compare this to other campaign guides that have come out and to see like how much of it is, really just like locations in the campaign setting versus like other character options to tie somebody into the setting.
Yeah.
I think that'll be interesting. Uh, so yeah.
Yeah, I definitely it will eventually make its way into my house. Um, because I have no control over that. And I'm okay with
Um,
that. And I
I
may I may read
for
a little bit of it,
me,
but I would not wanna play in one of these. I would not
you
wanna play
say
in one.
that, you say that, but
Unless you can make it Scooby-Doo style.
But, I bet if it was adapted to Ghost Hunters International D&D, you would be willing to jump on that.
I think I would have to be very carefully curated, yeah, it would have to be very carefully curated and know that I would not, could not, cannot bring a serious style character into that.
Well, here's the other thing. There's a way so something can be scary, and if it's presented in a way that's, like, over the top, like, somebody could still be scared from it and be laughing about it, like, if you're doing a played up, thinking,
Yeah.
like, if you're doing a physical, like, over the top pantomiming of, whatever her name is from The Ring, uh, but instead of having her be like creepy and like like slowly crawling after somebody, having it
Mhm.
be I thank you Samara, instead having it be a little more like describing her motion as like Taka from Moana, where it's more just like like scrabbling along the ground or whatever. That makes it like more
Mhm.
like a goblin. Chances are your players like might still be scared, right? Because now it's spooky waterlogged ghost, but now sort of like desperately scratching at the ground, you know.
Yeah, I think it definitely would need to be, if I were to play in one, it would need to be a little bit more curated like that. Just because I'm not a spooky, scary person. I don't do, uh, haunted houses, like, at
I mean,
all.
the other option is to take something really scary, give it a not scary appearance, but not changing any of the mechanical stats. So now you have the absurdity of blanket ghost uh, that now just goes boo, and your characters like can get scared and age like 40 years and die. Charlie Brown blanket ghost. That would just run around and go boo and like try and boot people with little pokey
Yeah.
pokey blanket hands.
Again, it would be something
I mean,
that I
that's a
would
little
have
more Scooby
to.
Doo, but like keeping the mechanics the same, so that it's like, oh no, we actually need to be scared of this.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
yeah. No. I don't see myself jumping into a game of it. anytime soon.
But yeah, or just pod people. Just tell all the other players in the group like that they're secretly pod people, but just act normally until a certain moment.
I mean, I can deal with pod people.
That's you have to have a very specific group to do that. Please don't just if you're gonna play with random people, please don't do that. Please don't gaslight your players.
No.
That's a fun.
I think with a lot of this, again, it really needs.
If you trust your friends, that could be a fun thing to do with your friends. And then the other person just be like, "Oh, okay, we're doing Invasion of the Body Snatchers. All right, well."
Yeah, I think it definitely to have a session 0. You need to go through that consenting gaming. You need to make sure that everybody's limits. And I joked about it earlier, but seriously, safe word. If things start getting too much, safe word to may that be we need to stop, may that be we need to take a break, something. But there needs to be.
There's a couple different games that have tools. So for example, there's one that's designed for kids called No Thank You Evil, where it's a card, and you say No Thank You Evil, and you play it, and you stop and do that or whatever. I mean, you could adapt it and say Not today, Satan.
Yeah.
And just throw down a coin or something and be like, no, we're not doing this. So yeah. But I mean, there's other elements. If you're all okay with it, I mean, it's Rime of the Frost Maiden has some elements of this too, where it depends really on. I think for some of the sort of secrets that they give players, the player knows, and so I think that diminishes sort of the horrifying aspect of the secret, where one of them's yeah, you had an encounter with a slod and they implanted a slod egg in you, and it's gonna hatch and your slod tadpole's gonna burst out of your chest at some point during this adventure.
Nope, not today, Satan. No.
So, but it's you're handed that card.
Mm-hmm.
And there are ways to circumvent that. And the reason why I say it kind of loses its impact is they're if you have a cleric in the group, I think it's by level 3 you can prevent that.
Yeah.
Because it's Lesser Restoration cures it. So
mm-hmm.
yeah. And a lot of the opportune moments don't appear until later in the adventure. So
mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right. That said, we have run a bit long, and so I think we want to get to quest log. So I think we're done talking about this for now, because we could go on and on and on about horror and consent in gaming and making sure everybody's okay and stuff. So we're gonna move on to quest log and talk about nerdy stuff that we did. All right. Courtney, we normally start with you. I think I would like to go first this time.
Yeah, go ahead. Right. What have you been up to, Sean?
I got 2 out of 3 things done. I did not make another TikTok video. Making videos is hard. Making videos with an animal that is not cooperative is more difficult.
I mean, that's why you need to get yourself a snowy owl bear that can just be there and be adorable. Everybody, this is Marshmallow.
But dog talk is where it's at. People want to see cute, fluffy dogs talking in funny and strange voices.
I mean, Marshmallow's fluffy. But the voice thing, yeah.
Yeah. It's a whole genre on TikTok, Courtney. I did do a comic. I did make a bunch of monsters for Jamora. So yeah, a bunch of drakes specifically because there are no dragons in Jamora. So sort of like Dark Sun, no dragons, just drakes. That said, I mean, there's still plenty of other big beasties out there to be plenty terrified of.
Yeah.
There's also wyverns. or wyverns, however you want to pronounce it. So there are those. It's just there are no true dragons in the setting.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, and then I mean the goal for next week is I'm gonna try and work on the Kazdal section for Jamora and just do another comic.
Nice.
And I'll keep the TikTok video on there. I'll try and do maybe like a DMing one or something. It's also, I mean, I'm open to hearing what people want to see on that. I mean, I could put clips on there. I mean, I think the clip of me trying that I did from when I was playing Monster Hunter and I like leapt off the back of my dog on my Palamute and like he got the stab ready to go and was just about to hit the monster and I got hit in the face with a boar and knocked back and ruined everything was pretty funny. So I'm just saying. Or the time I played Animal Crossing and I was trying to catch a tarantula and the tarantula all of a sudden just decided I choose death and just turned around and just yoinked itself right into the ocean.
Mm-hmm.
Said, you're not taking me alive. So yeah. So that's what I'm gonna be doing. I think there's something happening this weekend that I can't remember what it is. Oh, you know,
I
there's a
don't
big
know.
it's a big thing happening in Lanesboro. There's a whole bunch of stuff happening up
I'm
here.
like, farmers market in Pittsfield, downtown Pittsfield farmers market opens next weekend. So
Yeah.
that's what I
I'm getting
got.
my second
That's all
COVID
I
shot,
got.
so that'll be interesting.
I still have tokens from last year
I have one
that it
token from
ran.
last year, yeah.
I still have
So,
tokens from when it ran last, which was 2019.
yeah.
So it didn't really run at all last year.
Oh, that's true. Yeah. So mine is also from 2019. Yeah.
Yep.
So,
Is it one that I paid you in?
um, I don't know. It's a $5 one. So,
Yeah.
anyway,
Hey, you know,
Courtney, what did you do? Did you get your reading through a single Candlekeep adventure?
I did. I did.
Cool.
I was very excited. I was like, I got some time. Things are going okay.
Which one did you read through?
I finished the first adventure. So I'll
Okay.
say maybe a 0.5 because
Okay.
I had started the first adventure and I finished it now.
Okay.
Um
I mean, it still
so
counts. You finished it.
yep, I finished it though. It's been
1 week.
it's been a month of every single Tuesday. It's has literally become a thing where it's been one heck of a week. It's Tuesday, Lemon. Like that 30 Rock meme is my life right now.
I'm just
So
gonna point out the obvious. Is you don't have to read it on Tuesdays.
I don't. I don't.
Don't at me.
No, I don't. I usually like on the weekends.
Hmm.
Or Monday nights at work, it's every Tuesday it seems that I keep saying like it's been a long week and it's always only just Tuesday. Like the rest of my week kind of goes pretty cool.
Yeah.
Um but yeah, no, I would like to try and stay on this track of get back on this track of reading an adventure from it. Um, so that is while my world is still very, very, very crazy and unpredictable, um, and going through some very intense changes. Um, I'm still trying to just keep it at one goal right now. So
Okay. So just reading through the next Candlekeep adventure.
reading through the next one. Yep. The one that is for chapter 2 for level 2 players
There we go.
because they all just all of the
Yeah, yeah,
different
it's all
ones, they just
sequential.
increase by level, so
Yeah.
which I'm good with.
Yeah. I think at some
So,
point maybe I just need to take the monsters that I'm putting in the Jamora book and just throw them against the party. Uh and see how they fare. See if they're appropriately because challenge rating is such a nonsense
Yeah.
nonsense mechanic.
Yeah.
I don't want to get on that that
We'll
rant.
we'll get on that at another time.
Oh, geez. Devote a whole episode to just me ranting about challenge rating versus levels and rolls. So yeah, but that is going to wrap things up for this week. Thank you all for joining us for this episode of the 8-Bit Adventures podcast. If you would like to see more content from 8-Bit Adventures, be sure to check out 8-bitadventures.com. Let's see, do I have that? I don't. I don't have that as a command in the chat. But 8-bitadventures.com, over there you can find the 8-Bit Adventures webcomic. You can find my artwork, VODs of the streams, podcast videos, all that stuff, and more. If you want to help support that content, please consider either subscribing right here on Twitch or becoming a patron over at patreon.com/8bitadventures. Patrons get early access to the 8-Bit Adventures comic, as well as special access to behind-the-scenes content such as playtest content for Tales of Jamora, the Jamora campaign setting, special game projects, and custom artwork. Sort of, it's patron-only artwork, basically.
Yeah.
And finally, our opening theme is One Up by Professor Shy Guy. You can find his work over at professorshyguy.bandcamp.com. And with that, we are finished. We are done. So, as always, have fun, everyone. Happy gaming, and enjoy your pie cake.
Bye, everybody.